So we'll actually first have an example on how XML works, and then we will also see how to discover and exploit XXEs. And as I mentioned in my previous classes, first of all, you want to use this website like any other website that you would use, just to get an idea on how it works. So for example, we can see we have a number of products. If we click on the view details, you'll get the actual product. You'll see in here at the bottom, we're able to check the stock of this product, and you can select which store you want to check the stock in. If you click on check stock, you'll see that this functionality will work and you're going to get the number of units available. And then if we also look at the URL bar in here, you'll see that we have product ID equals 4. So again, you can test this for all of the vulnerabilities that we learn in my courses and in my classes here. But today, what we're trying to do is discover an XXE. So let's have an example of it. I'm going to turn on my interceptor, and we're going to use this feature again, the check stock. So we're going to click on check stock. And as you can see, once we click on that, you will notice that we have a post request. The post request is being sent to this path. And if we look down, you will see that the content type in here is application/XML. So this should be a clue that this web application is using XML for whatever reason we want. We're still not sure. Now, if you read further, you'll notice in the body in here, we have some markup. And this markup looks very similar to what I showed you earlier. And if you read the first line of this markup, you'll see XML version 1 encoding whatever. So we know that this web application, it's sending the data as XML. We can see the actual XML markup. And if you read it, you'll see that it is very human readable. It doesn't look like gibberish or something that is hard to understand. So you can see that it's setting an entity called stock check. The next entity in this entity is product ID, and the value of that is 4. You can see that the product ID is closed with the /, and then the next thing is the store ID, and the store ID is number 1. So now we know that when we click on check stock in here, the website is going to send data to the web application as XML. And in this data, it's going to specify the product ID and the store ID. So as usual, and as we have learned throughout all of my previous classes, whenever we see data being sent to this web server or to the web application, we should start interfering with this data. See if we can manipulate it in a way that will cause the web application or the server side to do something that is good for us, to reveal some information or give us access and so on. So when we want to manipulate data like this, you could manipulate it in here and just forward. But every time you do that, you have to do it, press forward and see the result here in the window on the left. But a quicker way would be to right click and send it to the repeater. And then when we go to the repeater, we will have the exact same request and we can send it and see the response. So again, now when we sent it, you can see the response was 854, which is what we see in here when we actually asked for the stock. It was 854 as well. So again, we sent the request as is without manipulation. So the next step would be to actually start manipulating this and see how it's going to work. You can start with manipulating data in here. For example, you could start adding quotes and adding all these things that we learned before to see if you can get it to crash or do whatever. Now you can see when we do that, it's just giving us a message saying invalid product ID 4. Now, since this web application is using XML, we can create an external entity. Hence the name of this vulnerability. It's called XML External Entity Injection. So we're actually going to use a feature of XML to see if we can manipulate this XML document that is being sent, or XML markup, to give us useful data. So we're going to paste this external entity. This line right here is basically a definition for an external entity in XML. what we're simply doing is we're defining an XML entity, we're defining a doc type, we're calling it a test, and we're creating an external entity. The name of this external entity is XXE, so you can call this name whatever name you want. The most important part in here is the use of the system, which basically can be used to read files on the system or even fetch URLs. So what we're saying is we want to read a file on the local system, and the location of this file is etc password. This can be any file you want. If you manage to read a local file on the target computer, regardless of what file it is, this will still be considered a vulnerability. So in a bug bounty or in a pen test, if you manage to read files on the target server that you're not supposed to be able to read, then you have discovered a vulnerability. You can learn more about this if you want to learn more about XML, but this, you can think of this as simply a payload that we're going to use to exploit XXE vulnerabilities. I will also include a cheat sheet within this class of a lot of other payloads that you can use. So we're going to place this payload in here. And if we send this request now, you'll notice that we got the exact same response as before. So nothing has happened. The reason for this, we created this doc type and we created this external entity in here and we called it XXE. And what this will do, it'll go ahead and it will load whatever content in this file, etc password, and the value of this will be stored in the variable. You can think of this as a variable that is called XXE, but we haven't read the value of this variable. But like I said earlier, if you note in here, whatever we put here instead of the 4 is being displayed in here. So it's saying invalid product ID followed by whatever I put in here. So if I simply put the XXE variable in here and send this request, I should see the data that is stored in the XXE variable after invalid product ID. And then I should see the data that I want in here. So let's try it. In XML, if you want to refer to a variable, you type an ampersand followed by the variable name followed by a semicolon. So like I said, this line in here is going to execute this. It's going to read the file that is stored in etc password. The value is going to be stored in XXE, and we're simply referring to the XXE variable in here because we know whatever we put in here, if it's an invalid ID, which it is, it will be displayed to us in the response. So we're going to send. And perfect. Now, as you can see, we're seeing invalid product ID. And the result of that is whatever we put in here, which is the value that was stored in the XXE, which is the content of the file that is in etc password. So once you are at this stage, you basically manage to discover an XXE vulnerability, and you can submit this as a bug, and you can also use this when pen testing, and you can obviously use it to read data from the target web server. You might manage to read sensitive files, and you can actually further exploit this to do so much more on the target web server.